special guest on today's episode. I'm on holidays, but that doesn't mean Random Thought stops. Welcome to the show, Mum.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Let's. You've made some dietary changes recently.
Correct.
Talk us through them.
Well, I've given up skim milk and skim yogurt and those sort of low-fat options because I've realised they've got a lot of added sugar in them, which, you know, is something you've been trying to tell me for a few years.
I've been telling you forever that skim milk is not actually healthier. So today's probably a good chance to talk about the fat myths, which you were sort of... You know, this is... Mum was worried about when she said, this is just a chance for you to say you were right again, wasn't it? And it's not. It's a good chance to talk about, I think, an important topic that a lot of people still are sort of caught up in, the idea that high-fat foods are bad for you because fat makes you fat, which it doesn't. So let's start with milk. Growing up, we were always on full cream milk, and you always had the skim, or scum as we call it, scum milk, because it looked like a horrible watery stuff.
It did. But in my defence, I did not like the full fat flavour on my tongue because I would never have the yogurts or the mayonnaise or even the margarine on my bread and things like that. So I didn't actually like the taste of the...
Do you think that was trained though because you developed that palate because you sort of had developed an aversion to fatty things?
I would say so.
And you're like, oh, it tastes fatty, therefore it is bad for me kind of thing?
And always being a little bit overweight, you believe all the stuff they say on telly and in magazines and stuff, give up the fat, which, is fine. But then when you look at the labels, you're actually better off to have the fat from especially dairy, to get rid of the extra sugar.
Yeah, because with milk, if you take full fat milk, for every mil of volume there is, if you have full fat, there's a certain ratio of fats, proteins and carbs. But if you take that same milk and then extract the fat from it to make skim milk or light milk or 2% or whatever that is they make, you're effectively changing the ratio. So the ratio of sugar for every milliliter of milk or every litre of milk you have a greater amount of sugar for the volume. So the issue isn't and full fat milk is higher in calories, but the beauty of having the fat, the balance of protein, fat and carbs in there is you get the low glycemic index, and so it balances out your blood sugar. Whereas skim, yes, it's lower in calories, and if you're watching calories, that's a factor. But because it's higher ratio of sugar, you get that spike, and that transient insulin and glucose spike, and that affects your blood sugar in other ways.
But it's not only the milk. The thing with that I would have 2 lots of mayonnaise. I'd have the full fat for you guys and the skim for me. Once again, that had how much more sugar compared to the...
Yeah, and the other thing with the whole... I'll talk about the history in a second, but the whole thing with the low fat thing was when you take fat out of food, we're drinking peppermint tea, by the way, today.
But we do have brownies.
Yes, we do.
Is that good?
No, they're not good. They're very bad. The thing with when you take fat out of food, if it wasn't originally a fatty food and you take the fat out, it tastes like cardboard, typically. Yeah. So any cereal, it just tastes like all bran, or it tastes like dry oats. It's not very nice. So to make it palatable, they add in, we'll have to replace it with something, but we have to keep it low fat. The answer therefore becomes sugar. And so you have a world, and it started in the 60s with a guy called Ansel Keys, who did a study. It's called the seven countries or the 6 countries study. He published a couple. And basically what it found was he found a strong correlation between saturated fat intake and heart disease and heart attacks. And what he did was he showed things like, look, America's up here, they're terrible. Japan and all these other countries who just eat rice and fish are down here, they're really good. And said, look, they eat more saturated fat, they also have more heart attacks, so therefore saturated fat. But what he did was he took a correlation, not a causation. So yes, there's a trend for countries like America and Australia as well, and Great Britain to have a higher heart attack rate and a higher saturated fat intake, but we also eat more donuts, and we drink more alcohol, and we drink more soft drinks. So there's other factors at play here, and he took that. The other thing with that study, this Ansel Keys guy did, was his 7-country study. And this was like the pioneering landmark study that all the food pyramid and everything is based on. So the food pyramid is based on, well, if fat is so bad for heart attack and obesity and all this sort of stuff, and fat makes you fat, therefore we need something that doesn't have that, and that became carbs and grains and starches. And so what he did was, his study, he actually had 22 countries in the study, not 7. And so when you actually plot all 22 countries on the graph, there's a trend, and definitely more fat intake, probably not, more saturated fat's probably not going to be all of a sudden a superfood, but it was a trend as opposed to this. He showed this steep curve, whereas it's more like general.
Is now when we can mention the Mediterranean diet too, with their olive oils and their oily fishes, anchovies, all those sort of things.
But at the same time as that, lots of pastas and breads and pizzas and stuff like that. And the thing that and all the good French are the same, pastries and butter and stuff like that.
Cream.
Cream and all this sort of stuff. But the thing, those two diets and the Japanese diet as well, and things like, I hate to say it, but things like paleo as well and those sort of diets, they basically eliminate sugar and fructose. That's the big thing they do. And so paleo is full on with fat. Atkins is full on with fat. Ketogenic diets, all these sort of trendy sort of diets that are out now, they're all very much okay with having fat. But the thing they all cut, they almost all eliminate some form of fructose or sugar, whether it be natural or unnatural and stuff like that, which is complete bull. If it's sugar, whether it's in fruit or in a candy bar, it's sugar.
It's sugar. Well, another thing we've done, and Dad's done it as well, is we've just cut the orange juice. We just have one glass of orange juice for breakfast, and the difference that has made in both of us. And it's amazing how quickly we got over not having that glass of orange juice. It's something else that became just a habit.
Do you notice now as well that you find that orange juice, when you do have it, is a lot sweeter?
So sweet.
And your taste buds just get so used to it and so desensitized to sweet things when you're having it all the time.
Another thing, we used to drink a lot of cider, apple ciders, and now...
Alcoholic and non-alcoholic?
Both, but now... you find if you just even have a sip, both of us find that we can't.
We had one yesterday, and I was like,
so
struggling
sweet.
through
It's like sugar. But we would, not that we consume a lot of alcohol, but we'd go for a cider probably more than a beer or even a glass of wine, and that is something that we found quite easy to get rid of.
Yeah. So what other changes have you made?
Well, I've never been a big bread eater. But I find that if I do have a slice of toast, I go the grainy stuff, which I don't know, is that good or bad? Like, the other boys are dead against anything that's got any sign of grain, even though we do the high.
It has to be like powder rice for them to even look at.
High fibre, low GI, which is white, but they won't have the grains. That's something that I have because I do like the grains. But is that another one of those myths that's just?
I think it's interesting. Actually, I know more about rice than I know about bread. When it comes to rice, there's long grain and jasmine and basmati, all different types. Brown and wild rice and black rice, which is one you cook a lot. It takes forever to cook.
But it's delicious.
It's delicious, but it's a waste of time.
Oh, is it? Nutritionally?
That's something I don't know. I have to have a look.
You need to look into that.
But the black rice is pretty tasty.
Looks good in a dish, though.
But the thing is, if we talk purely about a glycemic index point of view, basmati sits at about 66, which is pretty decent. That's for a white carb. That's pretty low. Brown rice only sits at 64. It's like this much better. But it takes like 10 times as much time to cook. One thing that I don't know enough about, but I know enough to know it's a factor, is that brown rice, I think brown and black have it as well. They have a thing called phytic acid because it's in the husk. And so when you have that as part of your diet, that phytic acid, it's like a type of fiber, I suppose. It blocks the absorption of minerals and vitamins. So it can get in the way of your iron and calcium absorption, stuff like that. So you might get a lower glycemic index and it might be a little more high and more fibrous, but you've got that phytic acid effect that you don't get in white rices. It also upsets some people's tummies, so that's a factor as well. But
we do find, and even Aaron, who's just now got off to uni, if I made a fried rice, I would have half white and half brown. He would prefer more brown than the white.
Has that? It's also a flavour thing.
And a bit more texture.
It's nutty and it's a bit more texture. And I find it a bit more filling too. So I think with brown versus white carbs, I think it's more a preference thing. I think it's such a small factor. Like, the bigger factor is what's going on in your bread. Are you having jam and butter sandwiches? Or are you having salad sandwiches with a little bit of tuna and cheese and tomato and beetroot and lots of spinach and stuff like that? Yeah. Or are you having, is breakfast toast and then lunch is a jam sandwich and then dinner is a bowl of pasta and garlic bread? That's when you've got issues. It's more the global factor of things. Like a little bit of brownie when you come home to visit mum every now and again, it's not a big deal. But if you're having that every single day and you had that for morning tea and afternoon tea every day, that effect accumulates. Yeah. In the same way that the orange juice you were having for breakfast, so you're having orange juice with cereal with skim milk for breakfast, barely any protein, all this sugar, all these carbs, stuff all protein, stuff all fat, so nothing to fill your stomach, it was just going straight through you, and it's like,
waste.
Get to 11 o'clock, so I'm hungry again, have a brownie, get to 1, I'm hungry again, and you constantly drip feeding your body full of insulin, so I think that the bigger side of things is more of an issue.
For sure. So you have to get back to me on the bread then?
Yeah.
Do some research on that for me, please.
I personally prefer brown. or like a wholemeal or a sourdough. I really like sourdough
sourdough.
because it's not as wheaty. I don't know if that's a thing. I just like sourdough. I think I just like the taste of it, and rye as well.
Yeah.
But as far as nutritionally, like the content's on the same, but as far as metabolically, I don't think there's that much difference. Maybe a little bit better with brown and wholemeal and that sort of stuff, but we're talking small factors, not the big things.
Good.
Cool.
Now, sauteing things, olive oil, butter, margarine. You've got a real thing about margarine.
Hate margarine, yeah.
Recently. Which you'll note we haven't got any in the fridge. Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah, nice work. Different oils will heat and combust at different and break down at different temperatures. Things like coconut, which is very high in saturated fats and things like...
Now, I'll just stop you there. Is that all it's cracked up to be? Because it's had some good and bad press recently.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gimmick. It's very high in saturated fat. It doesn't go rancid, it doesn't break down under heat, so you can crank it up to... It's like its breakdown point is very high, whereas olive oil is quite low. Yes. So you actually don't want to superheat olive oil because it goes off and chemically changes. I think it's overhyped though, the whole coconut oil. Like people eating tablespoons of coconut oil.
It's expensive. For a mother that's got a family, an extra couple of dollars you can save in your basket.
It does have a thing in it called medium chain triglycerides though, which do have some health benefits. They're metabolically quite good for the body. And
but how much do you have to get that benefit?
Help promote leptin and your body's fat metabolism. It sort of boosts your body and helps your body and your mitochondria burn more fat. But I think it's definitely better than having all the vegetable oils and the deep fried sort of trans fats.
But is a teaspoon enough a day? If you stir fry your veggies in a teaspoon, is that going to be enough to give you the benefits? Or
it's kind of like a supplement in that sense. I think how often do I have to have protein shakes? Well, how often else are you eating protein? If you're eating avocados and walnuts and stuff like that, and a little bit of olive oil here and a little bit of stuff there, then a teaspoon might be fine. But if you're not eating any of that, you might need to actually supplement with coconut oil or medium chain triglycerides. This is something that's probably beyond my scope now. You talk to a dietitian if you're into that sort of stuff. But as far as margarine versus butter, I trust cows more than I trust
a factory, a lab.
Yeah, because factories and labs, because they take margarine is actually grey when it comes out of the machine, then they colour it back to yellow to make people eat it. But it's taking sunflower oil and canola oil and stuff like that and chemically changing it so it becomes a solid at room temperature. Is effectively what they're doing. So it's changing the structure, which makes it slightly inflammatory and makes it very high in omega-6s, which our diets are already hugely overpopulated with, because back in I'll say it again, paleo days, it was very much a balance of omega-6 to omega-3s. Now we're very much all omega-6. And so there's so little omega-3 in our diet naturally that if you're having like margarine and stuff like that, which are quite high in omega-6 and quite inflammatory and quite not as good for the digestive system, that throws that balance even further. That's not to say butter is all of a sudden full of omega-3s, but it's a little more balanced. So I do a bit of butter, a bit of coconut oil, and then olive oil, but I don't tend to heat that too high.
We don't have very much butter. We hardly ever have toast, so sandwiches, and even then I've got a new recipe for a 3-minute mayonnaise. You jar olive oil, a lot of olive oil, but that's right, and an egg, and some lemon juice and a bit of salt, and you just put your blitzer in. Absolutely delicious. No additives with numbers that you don't know, so that's really good. It's a new way, but I still have that issue with the cup of olive oil to start with. Makes a good sized jar, but putting that 1 cup of olive oil just is in my head is not right to do that. I have to get over that, don't I?
Yeah, it's psychologically, it's a conditioning type state.
I was in the kitchen for a lot of years helping out at school, and the wonderful teacher, she was all about low fat. Miss Cherniak? Yeah, Pat. All about low fat and low, those sort of things. And even she had admitted with research recently with the diabetes and how the carbohydrates are, that's a whole nother topic for another time. But she said all this stuff we're learning in her mind, she's thinking this isn't right. And so I just saw that and she said, oh, I was right all those years ago. But yeah, she was very much the low fat. Yeah. So that, that galvanised my thought passage, which I've now got to lose, don't I?
We'll have to talk about carbohydrates next time I come home.
You will. Will we have enough time for carbohydrates?
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thanks for joining us today, Mum.
Thanks for having me.
Also, is it low tide? Come on. Much better.